Hello and welcome to Learning with Lulu. In this video we are going to do a quick summary of chapter 11 in Frankenstein. So chapter 11 is the creature telling his experience, or at least part of his experience. What we're being told by him is the events occurring after he's essentially cast out by Victor Frankenstein, his creator. The creature first spends like the first few days of his life just trying to survive in the woods. He describes how all of these new sensations, he describes how they affect him, how he perceives them, and we get the sense that it's a very slow learning and really sorting out what all these things are doing to his different senses, namely sight. He talks about gradually he is able to distinguish different separate things, and it is super interesting to think about, you know, if an adult were suddenly to be a newborn and experiencing everything we experience, touch, sound, smell, all of it, newly. And that's what the creature is going through. At one point he discovers a little fire that was left by some, I think it's left by some other traveling beggars, and he is enamored with the fire. Up until this point, he's just been eating berries and nuts and roots and whatnot, and he discovers with the fire, it improves the taste of some of those things, and he spends a few days, or at least a couple days, around this fire. He then is realizing that food in that area is very scarce, so he needs to move on. And he's reluctant to leave the fire, but he doesn't know any way in which to keep it with him. He had discovered how to keep the fire going. He's very perceptive in that he realizes, oh, wood is what feeds this fire, so I will collect more wood and add it to this fire. At one point he puts some dry wood on it because he has to go to sleep. He covers it with some more wet wood to like cover it and keep it safe. And he also discovers that like when he uncovers it, the wind kind of rouses, you know, it gives it more oxygen, it feeds the fire, and so he's like, oh, if I fan the fire, that'll keep it going longer. So the food gets scarce and he realizes he has to leave, so he does, and he has to leave his fire. As he's traveling, we know that the weather is getting cold, because he talks about how he gets to some open country, some fields, and they're covered with snow, and he talks about how cold it is on his bare feet. And he sees a shepherd's hut, and he's very curious about it, so he goes into it, and there was a shepherd there who had been preparing a breakfast for himself. And upon hearing the creature enter, he turns and sees and is terrified. And so he leaves and runs away, and the creature is then able to eat some of the food left behind, and he doesn't actually stay in the shepherd's hut for a very long time. He then moves on to find another place, either because he doesn't think it's as sustainable of a place to stay for an extended amount of time, and perhaps, I don't think he mentions that he thinks the shepherd might come back, but that's kind of my assumption. So anyway, he continues on. He comes across a village, and so first the hut compared to the forest, that was like, whoa, this is a much better way to live. And then he sees this village, and he sees the houses and the cottages, and he references like palaces, and is just in awe of like this really functional way to live. He mentions how they're growing vegetables, and also how they're able to like cultivate other food items from like domesticated animals like milk and cheese. And so he enters one house and the people within are scared of him. And he is run out of the village. Some people are terrified of him and run away from him, others attack him, and he describes that he ends up bruised and beaten. So he continues on and he eventually finds a really small, like he says he can't even like sit up straight in it, but a really small little, like almost like a lean-to. It's like a boarded in little like, I almost think of it as like a storage shed on the side of a cottage. And he kind of turns this into his little home. It's close to the actual cottage's fireplace, and so being on the other side of that, he's got a bit of warmth. There is a little stream nearby, and he is able to get food from around this cottage and the cottage itself. And so he starts living there. He fills in any gaps so that, you know, no one can see in. Also probably to kind of protect himself a little bit further from the weather. And he starts to observe the family that lives here. There is an older gentleman with, he describes, silvered hair, and two younger people, a young woman and young man. He describes the young woman as very beautiful, but she also seems to have this sadness about her, and the same thing with the young man. Both the young man and the young woman seem to be helping the older gentleman with the maintenance of the home and tending to the garden and land and all of that, and also just taking care of this man. At one point, the creature is looking in through a very small little chink in the wall that's next to the cottage, and the older man plays some music and he's just like, oh, this is beautiful. And eventually something about the music makes the young woman sad, and so she's crying, and then the old man comforts her, and they're just these really, you can tell he's really admiring these people and finding beauty in them, in their interactions with each other, and like the way they are conducting their lives. The chapter ends with another scene that the creature is observing of this little family, and they are sitting in their, you know, the sitting room, the living drawing room, I don't know what it's referred to as in a cottage, or at that time, but they're sitting together, and the creature, he doesn't really know he doesn't really understand language yet, so he describes the sounds coming from the young man as monotonous, and then he says, I later realized that he was reading. And I really like this chapter because you're getting the sense that the creature has the ability to perceive and enjoy things that this beautiful world has to offer. You know, he appreciates the sounds of birds singing and the loving interactions between these people. But the only reactions he is getting from anyone he encounters is fear and violence, based on his appearance, not based on anything about his character though. And this is the first time in the book where you maybe start to question Victor Frankenstein. And maybe it's not the first time in the book, but at this chapter, I'm telling you, you should start questioning Victor Frankenstein and questioning who the monster of this story is. Yes, we think that the creature has committed a murder, and I'm not even going to include a but or however with that. So yes, that has happened. Also, look what Victor Frankenstein has done. He bestowed life on something and then hated it and didn't even take the time to cultivate any sort of understanding of who they were, where this creature came from, what its purpose was. All he did was create it, hate it, abandon it, and now he's hating it even more for things it's done. So it's just, at this point, maybe start to have a little bit of questioning on who the monster or the antagonist of this story is. And it's maybe even a story where there isn't really a clear-cut antagonist and protagonist. It's very much a story about ethics and confusing like, it's hard to have lines drawn in the sand of who is good and who is bad, because there's so much gray area in this, and you know, who's really at fault in this story. So that's chapter 11 of Frankenstein. If this summary comes in useful to you, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share, comment. That's really the best way to support me in this channel so that I can put in the time and energy to continue making content like this. I know a few of my followers or subscribers or whatever are currently reading Frankenstein, and so I am trying to get these videos out in a more timely manner for those of you, but also realize that, you know, supporting the channel is the best way to do that, so that I know that I can invest so much of my time and energy in this channel. So that being said, I hope to see you back around. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you on chapter 12. Bye.